Oh, hello there. It's 354 days until Christmas 2020, and today I wanted to talk about the box office results for The Rise of Skywalker. We're a few weeks into the release now. We have some data to go off of, and the box office returns are starting to trail off. We're approaching the final few weeks of the release, and the bulk of the numbers are already in. So I thought now would be a good time to take a look at where The Rise of Skywalker stands currently, both domestically and globally, and then compare it to two other movies just as benchmarks. The first movie being The Last Jedi, the last movie in the franchise that it had to compete against, if you will. The other being The Lion King. The Lion King 2019 remake that Disney put out. I think both of these are very good benchmarks to use. The Last Jedi, obviously, because within the franchises, the third movie of the trilogies typically comes in between where the first and the second were box office wise. So if we look at the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy within Star Wars, the first movie set the ceiling, the second movie set the floor, and the third movie comes in between. So that's true of both of those trilogies. Looking at the sequel trilogy, it would appear at this point that The Rise of Skywalker will not achieve that floor the Last Jedi set. And there's a good bit of discussion to be had about why that is the case. Did The Last Jedi not properly set up the third movie? Is the divide in the fandom still too deep to kind of energize the box office numbers? Certainly it's still a blockbuster. It would appear that it's safely going to hit the 1 billion mark to enter the 1 billion club, which is a success by any measure, except that, as I mentioned before, it will not achieve the floor that The Last Jedi set, excluding some abnormality here. It's not going to reach that floor, and it's going to fall short of where certainly I thought it might come in, somewhere closer to what I expected to see with The Lion King. And let me just kind of give my reason why. The Lion King came out. There wasn't a lot of enthusiasm behind why that movie was being made. It was something Disney's been doing on these animated remakes. I did not ever see a great big swell or push. It wouldn't seem that the fandom, so to speak, for The Lion King is that great. And then lastly, the word of mouth that came out around The Lion King, just from the audience scores, is somewhat lower than it is for The Rise of Skywalker. So all of those tend to have me thinking that the Lion King will be a good benchmark for The Rise of Skywalker to kind of measure against. So if we just take a look, first of all, at the domestic box office, and I don't want to glaze anybody over on numbers, I just kind of talk about this in general, put some numbers up, but you'll see that The Rise of Skywalker now sitting domestically at almost 451 million compared to 543 and a half that the Lion King achieved in its total run. It would appear that the Rise of Skywalker will get a lot closer to that 500 mark, but we're kind of in the tail on the box office, and except for some strange thing that might cause another surge, I would not expect it to have enough legs to get much above 500 million. It'll probably get in that ballpark. I would think somewhere in the 500, give or take 10. So 490 to 510, something in that range, when all is said and done, which will fall short of The Lion King domestically. Just take a note here as well. The Lion King fell short of The Last Jedi's domestic number at 620. The Last Jedi, even as divisive as it is within the fandom, performed really well at the box office, and I think that's because people came out of the Force Awakens with a lot of enthusiasm looking forward. There wasn't as big of a divide. People were largely happy, even though afterwards there's been some tarnishing of that movie, just in people thinking that it was too much of a remake of A New Hope. But the movie was executed well and did not largely divide the fandom. Coming out of The Last Jedi, as beautiful as that movie is, it still divided the fandom greatly. While I'm a huge fan of it, my family is largely a fan of it. Most of my friends are big fans of it. People I know personally are big fans of it. I do know at least one real good friend that hated it, and I know online in the community that sentiment is shared by a lot of people. So I don't think that going into Rise of Skywalker we had the same enthusiasm, first of all, within the fandom, but I still expected it to perform in that ballpark, just given the weight of what it is. So you'll see then as we look at the international numbers or the global box office, Rise of Skywalker is falling, almost half, a little bit over half of where The Lion King ended its global run, at 1.65. Again, we know the Rise is gonna Rise Skywalker probably it will go over the 1 billion club, but it's going to fall way short of 1.6, and at this point it would be some sort of feat to reach 1.3. It'll probably end in the 1.1-ish range, so it's going to fall a good bit short of The Last Jedi. Just note here that The Last Jedi performed better domestically than The Lion King, but with the global box office receipts fell short of The Lion King, which is a lot of people talk about the China problem that Star Wars has, and there's no doubt that Star Wars has a China problem. It was the nostalgia that has brought U.S. consumers back to Star Wars, North American consumers back to Star Wars largely, does not exist in China. It was never released originally back in the 70s, 80s in China. So they didn't get those releases, and you don't have people my age who grew up with those movies, who brought their children to see those movies, and now their grandchildren. It just doesn't exist. So Star Wars does not have the same sort of resonation there. The other thing is that compared to Marvel, for example, Marvel's been releasing movies over the last decade that are big box office hits, and they kind of build up this goodwill among the fandom, and people have been able to follow that entire franchise. Star Wars tends to have these 20-year gaps that go in between movies, and with Disney kind of picking up the franchise and moving at a more rapid pace, there's a chance that perhaps the current generation growing up might kind of come along, but that frequency just hasn't been the same, so we don't have the same sort of fan base. The other thing that as you break down the international numbers further, you see Europe's numbers are way lower for The Rise of Skywalker than they were with either The Last Jedi or The Lion King. So the numbers aren't blamed entirely on China. There's the reception in Europe as a whole, United Kingdom, France, Spain, Germany, all of those are down significantly, as well as the other European countries still are down, and certainly some of that will be made up over time in the next days, weeks to come, but it still appears that it's going to fall short in those markets. So the question is there: why is the Rise of Skywalker underperforming so much globally? I think it's beyond the point now of saying that it had to do with other factors. We've got to look squarely in the face of how the movies were received by the audience, and certainly, even though I'm a fan of the sequel trilogy, all of the movies in the sequel trilogy, and have enthused me. They've kind of got me at a new heightened level of fandom. That's not the case with a great number of folks, and it's been very divisive. So the divisiveness has been undeniable at this point. There's no excuse that can be made to kind of soften it. The movie still is going to do quite well, but it's just not going to achieve the numbers that I think Disney, Lucasfilm, or many of the fans had hoped. So it would appear that Disney has heard the complaints. If you look at The Rise of Skywalker, the content of the movie itself, it has a lot of those elements that people were looking for. Disney Plus with The Mandalorian has brought fans in, new fans in, and people are excited about the upcoming Obi-Wan Kenobi series and into the upcoming season of the Clone Wars. And so there's a lot going on in Disney Plus that I think is reaching a new set of fans. It's bringing new people in. It's re-energizing the base, if you will. And I think that over time, as we've now closed the sequel trilogy, and we'll continue to watch the box office as it moves on. But as the sequel trilogy has closed, we're moving forward into other Star Wars content. We have that to look forward to. So I don't want to drag this on much longer. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'll monitor those and respond to any that come in. Any comments, questions. And as always, we've got Santa's mailbox back here. If you have a topic that you'd like to discuss or a question you'd like me to address in a future video, please submit those and I'll put them in the mailbox. We'll pull them out and we'll do a video on it in the future. Until then, may the Force be with you, and ho ho ho! Merry Christmas!